I think I didn't do anything wrong. Just tested the limits a little. That's what marriage is, right? I asked him to open our marriage as a joke, half to shock him, half to see if he'd still fight for me. He said sure, so calmly that I laughed, until the day he vanished, and the only thing that showed up instead was a manila envelope with my name on it. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. I'm Valen, and I swear, I didn't mean for it to turn into this. It started as a joke, one careless, confident moment that was supposed to make me look bold, not broken. I told my husband we should open our marriage, half laughing, half testing, if he still cared enough to get jealous. He didn't shout, didn't even look shocked. He just said, sure, if that's what you want. I laughed, thinking he was bluffing. A calm husband is worse than an angry one. I know that now. Back then, I called his silence maturity. I thought I was in control, that I could play with boundaries and still be the good one. People online said I was brave, modern, liberated. They didn't see the empty chair at breakfast or how he stopped leaving his mug beside mine. They didn't hear the faint printer hum at night, the soft click of a locked drawer, the phone alarms labeled personal. I kept saying it was just talk, just curiosity, just me exploring myself, but every just added up. Now he's gone, and all I have left are documents with my own words printed on them. The morning it started, I was already restless. The kitchen light felt too bright, like it was exposing every thought I hadn't sorted yet. Evan sat across from me, quietly buttering toast the way he always did. Edges first, no crumbs on the plate. That precision of his used to calm me, but lately it just irritated me. I told myself it was because he never changed. Every morning looked the same, sounded the same, even smelled the same. Coffee, toasted bread, silence. I'd been reading this article the night before about radical honesty in long-term relationships. It said healthy couples should challenge each other's boundaries. The line stuck in my head. You can't grow if you never test comfort. I decided I'd test ours. So I told him, in the middle of breakfast, that maybe we should try an open marriage. I said it with a smile, like a joke. I thought he'd laugh, maybe roll his eyes. He didn't. He set his knife down, wiped his hands, and asked if I was serious. I said, relax, it's not that deep. He said, it should be. I laughed, said I was just kidding, but part of me wasn't. I wanted to see if he'd fight for me, if he'd get jealous enough to prove something. Instead, he just nodded once and said, if that's what you want, Iris. The way he said my name, flat, careful, made me nervous. But I brushed it off. I called him sensitive, told him people our age were exploring modern relationships. He said, you mean excuses? I told him he was being dramatic. He said nothing after that, just finished his coffee and rinsed his cup. 2 mugs sat on the counter when he left for work, his spotless, mine, half full and cold. I stared at them for a long time before pulling out my phone and texting Maya. Told him we should open our marriage. He actually said yes, LOL. She replied instantly, queen behavior. Keep him on his toes. That's what I thought I was doing, keeping him on his toes. Later that day at the office, I told the story again. It became funnier each time. My co-workers laughed, especially Noah, who leaned back in his chair and said I was brutally honest. I liked the way he looked at me when he said that, as if I'd done something daring. I posted a short video during lunch, joking about modern wives and old-fashioned husbands. It got hundreds of likes before I even left the building. By the time I got home, Evan had already made dinner. He didn't mention the post, but I saw him glancing at my phone when it lit up. He asked if I'd eaten. I said I grabbed something earlier. He said, you mean attention? I told him to stop being cryptic. He said, you like people watching, don't you? I told him he was paranoid. He cleaned his plate, rinsed it, dried it, and placed it neatly in the cupboard. I asked if he was mad. He said, "No, just observing." I said, "That sounds creepy." He said, "Then stop giving me things to observe." After he went to the guest room, I sat in bed scrolling through comments on my video. One of them said, "This woman is living in 3025. Another said, "Men like her husband are lucky to have someone confident enough to test limits." I liked both. When I turned off my phone, I noticed a faint smell of printer toner drifting from the other room. The sound of quiet whirring came and went, paper feeding, stopping, starting again. I told myself he was just working late. The next morning, he was already gone. His mug was washed and placed upside down on the rack. I found a calendar note on the fridge in his handwriting. Downtown 9:45. I assumed it was a meeting. The detail of the time bothered me, though. Evan never wrote things like that down. He kept everything digital. I shrugged it off and called Maya on my drive to work. She told me I was inspiring people online, that my video had been reposted by a relationship podcast page. "You're going viral, girl," she said. I laughed and said, "Finally, for something that isn't boring." Noah came by my desk mid-morning, dropped a coffee beside me, said it was a thank you for being entertaining. He joked that his girlfriend would kill him if he suggested something like that. I told him she probably wasn't brave enough to handle honesty. He smiled in that slow way people do when they want you to know they're imagining something else. At lunch, I saw a text from Evan. "Hope your day's productive. That's all." No heart, no question. I typed back, "Always is," then added a winking emoji before deleting it. I didn't want him to think I was trying too hard. That night, when I got home, he was sitting on the couch with his laptop open, spreadsheets glowing on the screen. I asked what he was working on. He said, "Sorting." I asked, "Sorting what?" He said, "Information." I laughed and told him he was starting to sound like an auditor. He said, "Just keeping track of things." I asked if he was still upset. He said, "Should I be?" I told him I didn't know why he was acting weird. He said, "Because I'm not shouting." I said, "Because you're acting like I've done something." He looked at me for a long moment and said, "Have you?" I rolled my eyes and went upstairs. From the landing, I could still hear the faint clicks of his keyboard. Later, I came down for water and saw that his laptop was closed, but a single sticky note was on top of it. It said, "Bring forms." I had no idea what that meant. When I told Maya about it the next day, she said maybe he was just bluffing to scare me. "He's not the type," I said. "He's more of a slow burn." She laughed and said, "Then light a match before he does." That weekend, we went to dinner at a new bistro downtown. I wore the black dress he bought me last year. He complimented it quietly, said I looked different. I said, "Better or worse?" He said, "Changed." The word sat between us like a riddle. Halfway through the meal, I told him I was sorry if the whole open marriage thing had upset him. I said it like a peace offering, but he didn't take the bait. He said, "Upset isn't the word." I asked what word fit better. He said, "Documented." I blinked. What does that mean? He shrugged, said he liked keeping records of how things evolve. I laughed nervously, said he sounded like he was preparing for a trial. He said, "Maybe every marriage is one." I told him to stop making everything sound so serious. He said, "Not everything, just this." On the drive home, I kept checking my phone. Notifications kept rolling in. Someone had taken a screenshot of my earlier post and shared it on a relationship forum. The caption read, "Wife tests husband's loyalty. Husband's silence says everything." I showed it to Evan, expecting him to laugh. He didn't even glance at it. When we got home, he carried his briefcase into the guest room and shut the door. I heard the click of the lock again. I stood outside for a while, waiting for him to come out, but he didn't. I thought about knocking, but instead, I opened my phone and typed another caption. Silence means agreement, right? Within minutes, likes poured in. Later that night, I walked past his door again. The room was dark except for a thin strip of light from under it. The air smelled faintly of paper and toner again. I whispered his name once. No reply. I went back to our room and sat on the bed, scrolling through my comments, trying to convince myself I was still in control of the story. Before I fell asleep, I got a text from an unknown number. It said only, "Meeting, personal." I started to reply, but before I could, the message deleted itself. I woke up in the morning to find Evan's side of the closet emptier. Not gone, just rearranged. The hangers were spaced perfectly apart, a few shirts missing, everything too tidy. I told myself he was just organizing. I poured myself coffee, noticed the mugs again. 2 side by side, his clean, mine stained. It felt like a pattern, like proof of something I couldn't yet name. That afternoon, I met Maya for drinks downtown. She said I was trending again, that people loved my confidence. "You're a symbol of modern love," she said. I smiled but felt something heavy settle in my chest. When I got home, Evan was sitting in the living room, scrolling through his phone. I told him about the article, the comments, the messages from strangers telling me I was brave. He looked up just once and said, "Do you believe them?" I said, "Of course." He said, "Then you don't need me to." I froze. He stood, placed his phone on the table and said, "Good night, Iris." He didn't look back when he closed the guest room door. The printer started again a few minutes later. By the time my video hit 50,000 views, I started to believe my own story. I wasn't the wife who said something stupid. I was the wife who challenged convention. People kept sending heart emojis, comments about bravery, and messages saying I was giving women permission to speak freely. I screenshotted the best ones and showed them to Maya over brunch. She said I'd built a brand, like that was something sacred. "Evan will come around," she said between sips of iced coffee. "Men always do. He's probably just embarrassed he didn't think of it first." I laughed, pretending I believed her. The truth was, Evan hadn't spoken to me properly in days. He left early every morning, came home late, and spent most evenings behind the guest room door. Sometimes I heard the faint hum of the printer again, or the quiet shuffle of paper. When I asked what he was doing, he said, "Just organizing." One night I peeked in after he'd fallen asleep on the couch. His laptop was still open, screen glowing faintly. There were rows of folders labeled things like household, utilities, and bank. He'd never cared about paperwork before. I closed the lid quietly, telling myself it didn't mean anything. At work, everyone had seen the video by now. Noah stopped by my desk with that easy grin and asked if I was the open marriage lady. I told him it was just satire. He said it didn't look like satire. It looked like freedom. I laughed but felt the warmth in my cheeks. We'd been working late together all week, prepping a campaign for a new client. He'd lean over my chair sometimes, too close, to point something out on the screen. His cologne smelled sharp and expensive. When I mentioned it to Maya later, she teased me. "Careful, you'll end up making your little joke real." I said I wasn't that kind of woman. She said, "You already sound like her." That stung more than I expected. Evan came home early that Friday. I thought maybe we'd finally talk. Instead, he went straight to the kitchen, lined 2 mugs on the counter, poured himself coffee, and left mine empty. I watched him from the doorway. "You could ask how my day was," I said. He didn't look up. "You already posted about it." "I was joking," I said. He nodded once. "So was I." He rinsed his mug and placed it neatly on the drying rack. I noticed another small sticky note on the fridge. His neat handwriting again. "Paper drop, 11:20. "What's that supposed to mean?" I asked. He shrugged. "Just something I need to remember." When I pressed for details, he smiled faintly, that calm expression that made me feel both small and furious. "Don't worry about it," he said. "You've got plenty on your plate. Comments to read, hearts to collect." I called him cruel. He said, "No, just accurate." Then he went upstairs, leaving me standing there with the fridge still open. I spent the rest of the night scrolling through messages from strangers who thought they knew me. Some called me inspiring. Some called me selfish. I replied only to the ones that praised me. Validation is easier to read than judgment. Saturday, Maya convinced me to join her at a rooftop bar downtown. She said I needed to reclaim the fun part of my story. I wore a silk dress and heels, took selfies under the lights. Around midnight, Noah texted, "You look amazing tonight. I should have ignored it." Instead, I sent a winking emoji. When I got home, Evan's car was gone. He hadn't said he was going anywhere. His phone was missing from the charger, but his watch and keys were on the counter. For a moment, I thought he'd left me. The idea made my heart jump, not with fear, but with something closer to panic mixed with disbelief. Surely he wouldn't actually do it. He came back around 2 a.m. I was still awake, sitting on the couch pretending to watch a show. He didn't explain where he'd been. I asked, "Out." He said, "Learning." "Learning what?" He looked at me like I'd missed something obvious. How silence works. Then he walked past me, calm as ever, and went to bed. The next morning I saw the guest room drawer was locked again. I jiggled the handle, but it didn't budge. On top sat another sticky note, Archive B. I took a photo of it, sent it to Maya and typed, "Tell me this isn't weird." She wrote back, "Weird, yes. Dangerous, no." Men like control. It's how they cope. At work on Monday, Noah stopped by again. He joked that if Evan really was fine with an open marriage, I should take him up on it. I told him to stop being ridiculous. He said, "You started it." His tone wasn't flirty this time. It was serious, almost testing. I changed the subject fast, but something about the way he said it stayed with me. That evening, Evan was in the driveway when I pulled in. He'd organized the garage shelves, everything labeled and symmetrical. I asked if he was trying to move out. He said, "I'm just putting things in their right place." "Where's that supposed to be?" I asked. He smiled a little. "You'll see." I hated when he spoke in riddles. I told him he was acting like a robot. He said, "Maybe order's the only thing I can still control." When I told Maya about that conversation, she said he was trying to guilt me. "He's making you feel like the villain," she said. "Don't play into it." I believed her, mostly because it was easier than believing I might have crossed a line. By midweek, things between me and Noah had started to blur. He'd text me little things after hours, memes, jokes, pictures of his dinner. I told myself it was harmless, that it was part of our friendship. When Evan walked past me one evening, while I was smiling at my phone, he asked who I was talking to. I said, "Just work stuff." He didn't reply. He just walked to the counter, poured himself coffee, and said quietly, "You don't have to lie about what you've already announced." That made me snap. I accused him of twisting everything I said. I told him he was making our marriage worse by being paranoid. He said, "I'm not paranoid. I'm documenting." I shouted that he was insane, that no normal husband acted like this. He didn't shout back. He just said, "You like when people watch, so let them." The next day, I got tagged in a post from a coworker. It was a photo from our rooftop event, me and Noah standing too close, both laughing. The caption read, "Office goals." My stomach dropped. I checked the comments, some playful, some not. One said, "Hope her husband's cool with that open marriage." I deleted my tag, but it was too late. The photo had already spread. That night, Evan came home late. He didn't mention the photo, but when I walked into the kitchen, I saw a new sticky note on the fridge. It said, "Follow-up 3 Hasu." "What's this one?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He looked at it, then at me. "Progress." I told him he was scaring me with these cryptic little notes. He said, "Scary things usually come with noise. This is quiet." I didn't sleep well that night. I kept checking my phone, half expecting to see a message from him saying we were okay. Instead, I got one from Noah around midnight. If things are really open, maybe we should talk about it. I didn't reply. In the morning, Evan was gone again. The smell of coffee filled the house, but his mug was already clean and dry. Mine was still in the sink from the night before. When I went to grab my phone, I saw he'd left a note on the table, just a grocery list and a reminder, meeting, personal. The words felt heavy, like a warning I couldn't decode. At work, everyone avoided me. The photo from the rooftop had become gossip. Noah apologized, said he hadn't realized people would talk. I told him it wasn't his fault, but my hands were shaking when I said it. I called Maya from the parking lot after work. She told me to own the story before anyone else could twist it. Post something funny, she said. Make it look intentional. So I did. I uploaded a selfie with the caption, "Freedom looks good on me." It got 10,000 likes in 2 hours. But when I got home, Evan was sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop open again. He didn't say a word, just typed something, closed the lid and stood. "You're quiet," I said. He nodded. "I'm focused." "On what?" "Balance." Then he picked up his keys and left. The day everything tipped from uncomfortable to humiliating was Ruth's birthday dinner. She'd invited family and a few of her church friends, the kind of evening where you smile too much and laugh at things that aren't funny. Evan wanted to skip it, but I insisted. I told him it would look suspicious if we didn't show up together. He said, "You care a lot about how things look." I said, "That's what grown-ups do." The restaurant was a small community hall that doubled as a banquet space. Long tables, dim lighting, cheap floral centerpieces. Ruth was already seated when we arrived. She hugged Evan and gave me a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. I felt the temperature drop a few degrees. During appetizers, the conversation was normal enough. Work updates, the weather, Ruth's new garden. Then Maya, who somehow got herself invited, leaned over and whispered that I should tell everyone about the open marriage thing. She said people would love my confidence. I told her to stop being ridiculous. She said, "You started this story. Don't get shy now." I was on my second glass of wine when I made the mistake. Someone asked how Evan and I kept things fresh after 9 years of marriage. I laughed and said, "Oh, we decided to open things up a bit." The table went silent. Even the background music seemed to fade. Ruth's fork clinked against her plate. "I beg your pardon," she said. Evan didn't move. He just looked down at his napkin, folded perfectly into a triangle. "It's just a joke," I said quickly, waving a hand. "You know, modern humor." Maya snorted, and that tiny laugh broke the tension enough for a few awkward chuckles. But Ruth's face didn't change. "You think marriage is a joke?" she asked. Evan spoke for the first time. "Apparently, yes." I turned to him, forcing a laugh. "Oh, come on. Don't act like you're offended. You were fine with it when I brought it up." His eyes lifted then, calm but sharp. "Was I?" "You said yes." I said sure. The room went quiet again. Maya tried to smooth it over by raising her glass. "To honesty," she said, smiling too brightly. Ruth didn't join the toast. "I don't understand why you'd make that public," she said. "Some things belong at home." I muttered that it was harmless. Ruth replied, "Harmless to who?" I felt cornered, so I did what I always did when uncomfortable. I made it worse. I said, "It's not my fault people can't handle a little truth. We're adults, not in high school." Evan leaned back, eyes still on me. "Truth," he said softly. "You should try it sometime." The words hit harder than I expected. I laughed again, loud and forced, but my stomach twisted. Dinner dragged on after that. Ruth barely spoke to me. Evan answered questions about work with one-word replies. The silence felt like punishment. When the check came, Evan reached for his wallet and paid without a word. I tried to lighten the mood, saying something about how chivalry wasn't dead. He didn't smile. As we stood to leave, Ruth touched his arm. "You can always stay with me for a while if you need space," she said quietly. not looking at me. I pretended not to hear. Outside, the night air was sharp and cool. Evan walked ahead, hands in his pockets. I called after him, "You're being ridiculous." He didn't answer. When we got home, he went straight to the guest room again. The door clicked shut, followed by the faint sound of a drawer locking. I stood in the hallway, furious. I knocked once. "We need to talk," I said. From the other side of the door came his voice, calm as ever. "We already did. You just didn't listen." The next morning, I noticed the printer on his desk had run out of paper. A single blank sheet sat in the tray, like a ghost of whatever had been printed before. The air smelled faintly of toner. On his chair, a folder peeked out from under a stack of bills. I pulled it halfway open and saw neatly labeled tabs: bank, household, utilities, everything color-coded. Evan had never been that organized. I pushed the folder back before he came downstairs. When he did, he looked at me and said, "Touching other people's things again?" My throat tightened. "Excuse me?" He shrugged. "You're predictable." I said he was paranoid. He said, "You call everything paranoid when you're guilty." That made me snap. "I'm not guilty of anything. I made a joke, that's all." He didn't argue. He just grabbed his briefcase, set his coffee mug down on the opposite counter from mine, and left. The sound of the door closing echoed through the house, like a period at the end of a long sentence. I tried to distract myself with errands, but every little thing reminded me of him. His shoes lined up neatly by the door, the faint smell of his cologne on the towels, the note on the fridge from last week still reading, paper drop 11:20. I ripped it down and threw it away. That evening, Maya came over. I told her about the dinner, how Ruth had practically called me a homewrecker. She laughed it off, said older women always overreacted. But when she saw how shaken I looked, she went quiet. "You sure he's not planning something?" she asked. I said, "Like what?" She shrugged. "You said he's been writing things down, locking drawers. Maybe he's talking to someone." "He doesn't even have friends," I said. "Who would he talk to?" She hesitated. "A lawyer, maybe." The word hit me like a slap. "Don't be dramatic," I said quickly. "He's not like that." But that night, when I heard the faint click of the drawer again, my chest tightened. The next morning, I found another sticky note on his desk: "Bring forms." I wanted to ask what it meant, but he'd already left. Instead, I texted Maya. "He's getting weirder," she replied, or smarter. At work, Noah asked how my weekend went. I told him it was complicated. He said I needed a drink and invited me to meet some co-workers at a bar later. I hesitated, then said yes. That evening, at the bar, people were laughing, music playing, drinks flowing. For a few hours, it felt good to be somewhere. No one looked at me like I'd done something wrong. Noah kept making me laugh, leaning closer each time. When he brushed his hand against mine, I didn't move it away. It wasn't attraction. It was relief, a reminder that someone still wanted to be near me. A few people from work snapped photos. I didn't think much of it, but the next morning, one of them had tagged me on social media. The picture showed me and Noah sitting close, laughing. The caption read, "Team bonding level 100. I deleted the tag immediately, but my stomach twisted. When I got home that night, Evan was at the table again, writing something. I asked if he'd seen the post. He said, "I don't need to. People send me things." "What does that mean?" He closed the notebook. "It means the story writes itself." I told him he was scaring me. He said, "No, I'm just recording." I demanded to see what he was writing. He said, "You've shared enough for both of us." That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound in the house felt amplified. The hum of the fridge, the tick of the hallway clock, the faint rustle of paper behind the guest room door. Around midnight, I walked past his room again and heard a soft, mechanical whirring, followed by the beep of his phone. I pressed my ear against the door. He was talking quietly, his voice steady. Yes, I have everything. Dates, posts, screenshots. Thank you. My heart pounded. I stepped back fast enough to bump into the wall. The next morning, he was gone again, but the folder on his desk was thicker. When I tried to peek, it was gone by the time I returned from work. That evening, Ruth called. Her tone was sharp. "Whatever you're doing, stop," she said. "He's not going to react the way you think." I asked what she meant. She said, "You'll find out soon enough," and hung up. The house felt colder that night. I sat in the kitchen staring at the empty space where his mug used to sit beside mine. After that night, everything between us felt like a performance I couldn't end. I still posted, still smiled, still said everything was fine, but underneath it all, I was panicking. Evan stopped sleeping in the guest room. He stopped sleeping at home at all. His clothes disappeared one piece at a time until his side of the closet looked like a display window, perfectly arranged, mostly empty. When I asked if he was staying somewhere else, he said, "At peace." I tried laughing it off. "Oh, come on, that's dramatic." He said, "It's accurate." Then he picked up a folder from the counter, labeled Archive B, and walked out. I told myself he'd cool off, that maybe we just needed space. Maya said men always came back once they realized who had the power. "Let him feel your absence," she told me. "He'll start crawling back." But a week went by, then two. He texted only to confirm bills or Eleanor's school pickups. No emotion, just logistics. Then Noah texted. He'd seen my posts about rediscovering independence. He said he admired how strong I was. We met for coffee near the office. I told myself it was friendly, but he reached for my hand halfway through the conversation, and I didn't move it away. I liked the attention. It made me feel visible again. He started showing up more often. Lunch breaks, after-hours meetings, late-night calls about work. One evening, we ended up at a hotel bar after a client event. It wasn't planned, at least that's what I told myself. I said we were just decompressing, but when he touched my shoulder, I didn't stop him. It wasn't love or even excitement. It was proof, to myself, to whoever might still be watching, that I wasn't the boring wife Evan had grown tired of. The next morning, there were photos, not from us directly, but from someone at the event. Me and Noah sitting too close, his hand on my knee under the table. The caption, "Modern Marriage Goals." My phone buzzed non-stop all day. Co-workers stopped making eye contact. My boss called me in and said, "Keep your personal life off company time." I laughed awkwardly, said it was a misunderstanding. He didn't look convinced. When I got home, Ruth's car was in the driveway. She was sitting on the porch, arms folded. She didn't wait for me to speak. "You've embarrassed this family enough," she said. I told her it wasn't what it looked like. She said, "It never is, until it is." Then she stood and walked past me without another word. Inside, the house smelled faintly of his cologne, but he wasn't there. The guest room desk was empty. The printer was gone, the folders missing. I searched drawers, cabinets, even the coat closet. Everything he'd once touched was stripped down to essentials. When I finally checked the kitchen, I found only one thing: his mug, clean and dry, sitting beside a single envelope. Inside was a note in his handwriting. "File uploaded successfully." I threw it across the room. Later, I called Maya. She said maybe he was bluffing. I told her he didn't bluff. She said then maybe he'd given up. "Maybe he's not coming back," she said. I almost wish that were true. But the way he left things, tidy, deliberate, felt like the opposite of surrender. Noah called that night, asking if I was okay. I said yes, though my hands wouldn't stop shaking. He said he didn't want to be dragged into drama. "You said this was just fun," he reminded me. I told him it still was. He didn't sound convinced. By the weekend, he'd stopped answering my texts. My name started popping up on gossip pages. Someone leaked screenshots of my old open marriage post beside the new bar photos. The comments were vicious. Guess he took her seriously. Hope she enjoys being free. I deactivated my accounts for 2 days. When I logged back in, one message stood out, a direct message from an account I didn't recognize. It had no profile picture, no followers. The message said, "Everything you posted has been archived. Check your doorstep Monday morning." My stomach dropped. Monday came, and with it a small box on the porch. No note, no return address. Inside were printed screenshots. My posts, texts with Noah, even a photo I'd deleted months ago of me half drunk at the rooftop bar. At the bottom, one line written in blue ink, "Transparency is a gift." I drove straight to Maya's apartment, shaking. She tried to calm me, but even she looked scared. "He's documenting you," she said. "He's building something." I said, "He wouldn't do that. He's not that kind of man." She said, "You don't know him anymore." That night, I went home to an empty house. Every clock ticked louder than usual. The walls felt hollow, the air stale. I opened my laptop, half expecting a message, but there was nothing. No calls, no texts, just silence. Around midnight, I heard a car outside. Headlights flashed across the living room wall. I ran to the window, but by the time I looked, the driveway was empty. Only tire marks on the wet pavement. I stood there until the porch light flickered off automatically. The house went dark again. The next morning, I found his wedding ring on the kitchen counter beside a fresh mug of coffee. Mine. Still warm. He'd been there. By the time the weekend arrived, I was exhausted from pretending everything was fine. My online posts had slowed. The bar photos with Noah had circulated enough that even casual acquaintances at work were whispering. I told myself I was untouchable, that I could spin this story however I wanted. Maya kept telling me I was leading the narrative, but even she hesitated when I mentioned the small box of printed screenshots Evan had left on the porch. I ignored it. I told myself it was just a reminder, harmless. But that night, I noticed subtle changes in the house I couldn't explain. The guest room drawer had a new lock, slightly different from the old one. A faint hum from somewhere, printer, computer, or maybe scanner, kept starting and stopping. I told myself it was my imagination. Saturday morning, I woke to find 2 mugs on the counter again. His, spotless. Mine, half-finished and cold. That wasn't new. What caught me was the sticky note beside his mug. Meeting, personal. I stared at it, trying to read between the lines. Was it a reminder, a threat, a joke? I didn't know, and I hated not knowing. I called Maya. She laughed lightly, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Iris," she said, "he's not bluffing. Whatever he's planning, it's calculated. He's not going to lose control." I tried to brush it off. I told her he was just making a fuss over nothing. I went about my day, pretending the box of screenshots, the locked drawer, and the cryptic notes didn't exist. I even met Noah for coffee. He was distant now, polite, careful. I realized he'd already started pulling back. By afternoon, I was home alone. I started reorganizing my wardrobe, scrolling through old photos, trying to remind myself of who I was before all of this. I paused at the door of the guest room, hearing the faint click of the lock again. My stomach sank. Evan walked in quietly from the kitchen. He didn't sit, didn't smile. He just placed a folder on the counter. Archive C, it read. "What's this?" I asked, my voice lighter than I felt. He looked at me calmly. "Records." I rolled my eyes. "You don't need records of me. I'm not doing anything wrong." He nodded slowly. "Exactly." The way he said it made me feel small, exposed. I wanted to argue, to laugh, to turn the situation into a joke, but I couldn't. He wasn't reacting emotionally. He was steady, precise, deliberate. Later that evening, I went to pick up Elena from school. Evan wasn't there yet. When he arrived, he didn't smile or make small talk with her. He simply got out of the car, walked to my side, and opened the door. Elena climbed in quietly. He buckled her seatbelt with care, then got back in. His face was calm, unreadable, but I could feel the tension beneath it. I tried conversation. "How was your day?" he said. "Uneventful." I pressed. "Nothing to tell me?" He shook his head. "Some things aren't for discussion yet." I wanted to snap, to tell him he was being ridiculous. I reminded myself, though, that the past weeks had changed everything. He hadn't yelled, hadn't fought, hadn't tried to punish me openly. Instead, he'd been building something I couldn't see. At home, I found another sticky note on the fridge. This time it read, "Bring forms." I stared at it, mind racing. "Forms for what?" I asked Maya again, but she shrugged. "Iris, he's not acting without reason. He's serious about this." I tried to convince myself it was just paperwork, something about bills or the house. But the thought didn't settle. The house felt colder than usual. I noticed how he'd moved certain items, his shoes neatly aligned, papers stacked, nothing out of place. It wasn't messy control. It was exacting. I spent the evening scrolling through my phone, reading comments, hoping for distraction. People online still cheered me on, called me fearless, called me brave. One comment said, "He must be terrified of losing her." I wanted to laugh, wanted to believe it. But in the quiet of the kitchen, with his mug clean and my half finished, I realized the person I was looking at, Evan, wasn't scared. He was waiting. That night I heard him in the guest room again. The faint whirring of electronics, a paper shuffle. I tried not to listen, but curiosity pulled me toward the door. I peeked in the crack and saw his laptop open, rows of folders on the screen. Dates, names, posts, screenshots. He was collecting everything I'd posted, everything I'd said, every photo that might embarrass me. I stepped back. My heart pounded. I wanted to call out, to demand answers, but I didn't. I walked away instead, telling myself it was nothing. By the next morning, I could no longer ignore it. He was leaving small signs everywhere, the locked drawers, the sticky notes, the careful arrangement of his things. I realized he'd been preparing for weeks, not shouting, not threatening, just quietly building a case I couldn't see for something I hadn't imagined. I tried to regain control. I posted a long status online about independence, honesty, and modern relationships. I shared my truth as I had for weeks. I wanted people to understand me, to cheer me, to prove Evan wrong. But in the kitchen that evening, I saw him standing at the counter, watching me through the reflection in the window. He didn't say a word. "You're calm," I said, forcing laughter. "I've never been anything else," he replied. "You're being ridiculous," I said. "Or accurate," he said, with that same calm tone. I wanted to scream, but I stayed quiet. He walked past me and left the room, closing the guest room door behind him. I heard the faint click of a lock. I sat in the living room for hours, scrolling through comments, replaying every word, every post, every photo. I kept asking myself if I'd gone too far. I told myself no, that I was just honest, that I was modern, liberated, brave. But the reality of his calm, deliberate actions was something else entirely. Later, Elena asked why Dad had been sleeping in the guest room. I mumbled something about him needing space. She didn't press further, but I could see the small worry lines on her forehead. I felt a pang in my chest. Even in my desire to prove myself, I couldn't escape the consequences. That evening, Evan appeared briefly in the kitchen. He didn't speak, didn't look at me. He simply placed his briefcase on the counter and left. I noticed another sticky note, this one smaller. Follow-up 2:15. I stared at it. My mind raced, thinking of every possible scenario. I wanted to tear it down, to ignore it, to pretend nothing had changed. But the quiet certainty in everything he'd done, the precision, the meticulous preparation, it scared me more than anger ever could. I called Maya one last time that night. She didn't answer. Her voicemail said, "I can't advise you anymore. You have to see it for yourself." I realized then that there was nothing left to negotiate, nothing left to explain. Evan had moved beyond conversations, beyond threats, beyond the kind of chaos I thought marriage allowed. When he returned from work the next morning, he didn't speak. He merely set his coffee mug on the counter, opposite mine, his clean, mine still cold. He looked at me calmly, then said 4 words that made my stomach drop. "I'll handle this properly." I froze. That was it. No explanation, no threats, no yelling. Just those words, steady and final. I wanted to argue. I wanted to scream that I hadn't done anything wrong. But I couldn't. The weight of all the locked drawers, the archived posts, the printed screenshots, and the careful organization of our home pressed down on me. I realized then that everything I had laughed at, every post I'd made, every joke about freedom and modern marriage had led to this. The calm, deliberate, proper handling of a man I had mocked, humiliated, and dismissed. I went to my room, sat on the bed, and stared at the 2 mugs, one clean, one cold. I didn't touch them. I didn't move. I just sat there, finally understanding that the game was over, and that he had been playing a different one all along. I arrived at the courthouse plaza, expecting confrontation, maybe tears, maybe an argument. Instead, Evan stood quietly beside a process server. The papers were handed to me, formal, precise, quoting my own posts, detailing custody arrangements and financial oversight. My stomach dropped, my mouth went dry. Cameras from gossip pages caught everything. I opened my mouth to protest, but his calm eyes told me it was over.